Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for holding this hearing, and thank you, Director Young, for coming to give the position of the administration on the budget. Today's hearing is doing what the Budget Committee is supposed to do, budget issues. We've spent a great deal of time over the last 2 years on climate, on abortion, and a lot of other issues, but this is what this committee should be doing. So I compliment the president or the chairman for having a day of budget hearings. I was cautiously optimistic hearing President Biden's call for bipartisanship and unity during his inaugural address, but boy, have I been disappointed. For 3 years, the president has embarked upon a far-left agenda. He's taken a my way or highway approach to governing, whether those who disagree with him are attacked as extremists. He topped that off last week with the most partisan State of the Union address that I've ever heard, and I've heard a lot of those presidential State of the Unions. A partisan president, I find, is so different from the bipartisan Senator Biden I worked with for 28 years in the United States Senate. Now comes his fourth budget, offering more, same radical agenda. At a time when we need real solution to put our fiscal house in order, this budget offers nothing but false promises and a far-left wish list. You know, we all know that this would never pass even this Congress. Just a few years ago, this administration tried to claim that blowing up the deficit was a fiscally responsible thing to do. In fact, they said at that time higher interest rates would be a good thing. Now our nation is barreling down the fiscal crisis that was started then. We're over $34 trillion in debt and still counting. Even the president's media allies can't stomach his dishonest deficit reduction claims. CNN, for instance, called the president out, noting that his policies, in fact, quote, have had the overall effect of worsening the annual deficits, not reducing them, end of quote. Thanks to irresponsible policies, reckless spending, and decade-high interest rates, debt service costs have more than doubled since 2021. According to the Congressional Budget Office, interest on the debt will total $870 billion this year, exceeding what we expect to spend on national defense, the #1 responsibility of the federal government. If that isn't daunting enough, within 10 years, the Social Security Trust Fund is projected to go broke, putting benefits for over 50 million seniors at risk. Now, isn't this a sad political climate when a candidate Trump and a President Biden both say that they're not going to cut Social Security benefits? What do they think is going to happen in 2033, just 8 years down the road, when we all know that if we don't do something about Social Security, everybody's benefits are going to go down to 77% of what they're getting now? If there was ever a time for a president to show leadership with his budget, this is it. Instead, he offers proposals so far out of the mainstream. Most have already even been rejected by congressional Democrats. Even if all the president's fantasy proposals were enacted, the budget still fails to rein in unprecedented debt and deficits. Under this budget, publicly held debt as a share of the economy would rival the record set at the wake of World War II. Over the 10 years, the president's budget racks up a disastrous $16 trillion in cumulative deficits. And I think when I go to my 99 counties to have Q&A with constituents, which I do every year, not at every one of them, but at most of them, they yell at the back of the room, what are you going to do, Grassley, about the $33 trillion national debt? Soon we're going to be asked what we're going to be doing with a $50 trillion national debt. That's despite proposing $5 trillion in new job-killing tax hikes. That's in addition to a $2 trillion tax hike in stores for families earning under $400,000 due to the president's shelving of the 2017 tax bill. Now, how do you get around the fact that the 2017 tax bill sunsets under budget law, because you can't enact permanent law for more than 10 years, without even a vote of Congress? We're going to have the highest tax increase in the history of the country. Now, unwittingly, the president's budget shows what anyone who understands our fiscal situation knows: there aren't enough rich people to solve our budget woes. So I would remind even the chairman that just talked about taxing the rich that you could confiscate, not tax, but confiscate all the wealth of the wealthy people in this country, and you'd run the government for just a few weeks or at most a few months. There's just, eventually you're taxing people that aren't rich to do everything that wants to be done. I think Margaret Thatcher said it best, and I quote, "The problem with socialism is that you eventually run out of other people's money," end of quote. The president's budget is case in point. It includes no serious attempt to address ballooning autopilot spending that is the main driver of our record debt and deficits. Moreover, it piles another $2.5 trillion in new mandatory spending, amounting to one of the largest expansions of the federal government in American history. Now, it's simple math. If you want to implement European-sized government, you'll need to impose European-style taxes on everybody, because that's what the, I can't think of the across-the-board tax cuts that they have for everybody that's similar to what we have called sales tax here. I'm sorry, I can't think of that word. But it's simple math. If you want to implement European-sized government, you'll need to impose European-style taxes. That means higher taxes and higher prices for Americans of all income levels, and that's what this budget does. Ironically, President Biden likes to boast that our economy is doing better than Europe's. That's been true nearly my entire lifetime. Our economy does better than Europe's because this country has always rejected the kind of big government tax and spend policies envisioned by this president, copying Europe. Unfortunately, when it comes to the president's budget, the president's proposals and the Congress disposes, and I see Congress wasting no time before disposing of this budget. If the other side disagrees with me, then I challenge them to set a date to mark this budget up. It won't happen because even most Democrats wouldn't vote for this calamity. Unfortunately, this budget is another lost opportunity for the president to demonstrate leadership on pressing fiscal challenges, leadership that's desperately needed if we're ever going to climb out of a fiscal hole that we've dug ourselves into.